Good morning. This is Valerie Doerr, and I will be turning a natural edge cherry burl bowl. This bowl, when I started out, it was cored from a larger bowl, so it is a rough cut that I am starting with. I normally do not start with too many rough cuts. The burls are sometimes hard to core, but this one I was able to core, which would make this demonstration a little bit faster. Starting out, I have mounted with a friction block chuck against my lathe. I'm adjusting my tool rest there. I have got a 5/8 bowl gouge that I like. It is a Thompson tool, and you can see I'm just taking off a little bit of edge there, working my way up, not being real aggressive, just some light cuts, working on my tendon there a little bit. And I have a Jet 14, I'm sorry, it's a Jet 1642 lathe. There we go. I've got just working that wood, just taking a little bit off, smoothing it down. I like to turn cherry burls. I like to turn Texas ebony. I like to turn ash. I do not turn walnut. And the reason I do not turn walnut is the shavings, I break out. I'm allergic to something in that shaving. There I'm doing a real light push cut, just trying to take a little bit off of that. Tool coming up real light when I hit the bark. Very, very light. You can see that I lost a piece of bark there, going after it. It happens. I'm trying to figure out where it went and finding another piece of bark. That piece of bark a friend picked up for me, Daryl. He was in the shop and he found that piece of bark that flew off on the other side. That is not unusual when you're doing a natural edge. Now, to put the piece back on, it's a puzzle. I'm turning the wood, checking where it fits. Hopefully I can find that fit. And when I do, I take my accelerator, I spray both the bowl where it fits and the piece. And then I add a medium CA. There we're backing up. Just trying to fit that little baby back into where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, I'm adding my accelerator, and as you can see, I'm spraying it on the piece and on my bark. And at this point, I don't put on shellac. I just put the medium CA, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, straight on the bark piece and attach it. And I just put a little hand pressure there, hold it for a while. Sometimes I'll even add a little bit more CA to between the bowl and the bark. Now, this piece isn't quite going back the way it should, and part of that is trying to put the pieces back in, which one came out first, which one came out second. You can see it's a struggle sometimes. And what I've done is I just took off a little piece there on the end and put the majority back in. Spray it with my accelerator. Add my medium CA. For your new turners, that is like a super glue. And attach it. Hand pressure. And there I'm adding a little bit more CA on the outside. Doing a little dabbing and a little bit more accelerator. Now, working to see if I can get that little piece back in. At this point, it's not going to go back in. So my plan is to deal with that little void a little later on. But you can see this burl has some wonderful cracks, and I will be delighted to fill those and show you how to fill them in a little bit. Looking around for some more bark and seeing if I can find anything else. Ooh. And we're going back to turn. I usually turn around, my speed on my lathe is about 1,000. Sometimes a little less than that, but when I'm turning, it's anywhere between 800 and 1,000, just kind of depending, especially if my pieces are geometrically balanced. If they're not balanced, you've got to slow it down a little bit. There's another push cut. I'm hoping those pieces I glued in stay in, and they did. And yes, I have more to take off. You can see it's not smooth at all, but still taking light cuts. And another push cut as I go up to the top. Now, there's still marks from when I cored that need to come out. And I'm playing with some bark to see if I can figure out where it goes. Okay, I've got some finishing touches to do right there. So just a light cut again. I have not done my tendon yet. We will work on that in just a little bit. I'm trying to get rid of some of my tool marks. You can see just okay, here I am going for my, I'm marking my tendon. Grab that pencil. And I've got a small parting tool, readjusting my tool rest. And this is making the tendon. This is the tendon that will hold my bowl into my chuck. And I'm just finishing up my bottom just a little bit there. It's not the final cut, but Okay, this is carving. I've taken the bowl off the lathe and I am using a Dremel and I am just opening up my cracks. Just trying to smooth off those edges going down into the crack with the Dremel. So I'm opening up any of the wide cracks, but I'm opening up some of the narrow cracks, some of the small ones. I try to open them up big enough that I can put in my inlay of turquoise and just wide enough to do that. And, you know, I may not do every little crack, but I do a lot of my cracks, as you can see. Now, some of my cracks I will fill with, some of my large cracks I will fill with, could fill with shavings. Now, in this bowl I do not do any with shavings. I use coffee grounds, I put in bark, or I put in key filings as a base to some of my cracks, depending on how large they are. But the large cracks, again, I'll fill with shavings or bark, if it's appropriate, if it's close enough up there at the top, or coffee grinds, or key filings, because I don't want to fill all of those cracks with my inlay. That's, to me, a waste of inlay. Most of my bowls I turn to 3/8 of an inch or less. So if I was filling some of those cracks with my turquoise inlay, it would be, you know, a lot of inlay. So I'm using a simple Dremel. The tools, that little tool that's there on the end of the Dremel is, we just got that from, what's Harbor Freight. And most of these are cracks. Now, I'll pull out a toothbrush. Thank goodness my, husband shares his old toothbrushes with me. And just trying to get the shaving or the little bit of debris out of the way. And then I'll go back and look again. Are there cracks that I need to open up a little wider? Are there cracks that I missed and that I want to, just go in and Dremel them, open them up? A lot of times I'll go back and redo some of my first cuttings or first openings, just to make them a little wider, a little deeper. You don't want them real thin, otherwise you can't see the turquoise. And if you don't have them deep enough, you can possibly sand out everything that you put in. Okay, one more time with the toothbrush, clean it all off. And then I'm going to put a coat of shellac on. That is me there. I put on my gloves and I put shellac. It is Bullseye Seal 100% wax-free shellac. And I'm putting the shellac on because if I don't, the wood can be stained by the CA. And I don't know if you can see, I've got an old piece of blue jean material protecting between me and my work. There's my bullseye shellac. There's the Easy Bond that I use, the instant glue. I use medium and thin. I've got key filings, and this is my Inlays. It is from turtle feathers, and I get the small Inlays, and I add a little bit of key filings to it to stretch it a little bit and to give it more of a natural look. Once I put the shellac on, I usually have to go back, brush off all the little, there's usually material. I add with just a paper towel, one of those blue paper towels that you can get from, I think we get it from Sam's or wherever. But you've got to get rid of that. Now, what I'm doing is I'm testing to see if I can get some bark back in. And when it's a big piece of bark, I spray it with my accelerator, add my medium CA glue to it, and press it in. And I use the back of my tool to just kind of press it a little bit more solid in that spot. There's no guarantee they don't pop out, and they have. And you've got to decide whether you want to put it in again or what. But you can see I keep little pieces of bark from when I turn. I take it off the piece that I'm turning before I turn, where I know it's not going to be my edge. You saw me add a little bit more accelerator, a little bit more medium CA, and I use some dental picks. The orange handle is kind of a dental pick, but it's not a real true dental pick. And just trying to fill that big crack there with bark. Just put it in. And add. Now, yep, just a little bit more medium CA and accelerator. And a little bit of pressure. Now, husband, don't watch. I cut down those edges because if I don't trim down those edges one way or the other, it puts too much pressure on it and it'll pop that bark right out of there. I've got another little piece I want to fill in with bark. So I go around and I fill what I want first with bark. And when I get all those spots filled, then I go either to coffee grinds or to my, my turquoise inlay. Now this piece, I usually don't go to the inside to fill, but once in a while, if there's something that looks a little bit shaky, I may want to put some bark on the inside or CA or glue on the inside to make sure that that, stays solid. Now that was the little piece that had come, that I couldn't get in earlier when it was on the lathe. And I'm just putting in a little piece of bark there to hold those other two pieces together. You can see that it's between, there was just a little bit of a cavity there. And I will add little pieces of bark to fill in where it is. And I'm using a dental pick again. Now, I am adding a little coffee grinds to stabilize that. The coffee grinds are black, and they will stay pretty much black. So I feel pretty confident about putting it in there. And this is thin CA, because then it will absorb into the wood. Don't touch that; it's hot. But I got my little toothpick. Dental pick there, and there usually is a chemical reaction. You saw a little bit of smoke there. You will see some more there. So be careful, have a really good exhaust fan. If I'm doing a lot of it, I will have a fan behind me. And I'm adding just a little bit more bark into that place because I don't want to lose the bark that's there, and I want to stabilize it. Just pushing it down. Okay, now that I've got the bark and my key filings in that I want, I will start filling just a bottom layer of key filings. These key filings we get from like Lowe's or Home Depot, where they make keys. We just go in and ask them if we can have them. They'll look at you strange and ask you what you want it for, but they usually give it to me free. And there I'm pressing it in with like a dental pick. And I will use my fingers to shove it into the cracks, but you've got to be careful. That stuff, it's kind of like a splinter. You can get them into your fingers, so be prepared when you're doing that. But you can see I'm just adding wherever I think I'm going to put some of my turquoise inlay. There's my turquoise inlay with a few key filings. I get the very granulated ones. That's not the powdered ones. And I fill cracks, pushing it in with my finger, patting it down. And then I will add the thin Easy Bond CA. And I use the thin here because it absorbs and goes down into those cracks. And then later on, I usually add a medium CA to the top of that. Now, once in a while, if the crack is not real deep, I will just add my turquoise inlay. But you see, I'm working it in with my dental pick. And there's the thin CA. And that thin CA will also help that bark stay on. I usually, so I know there's some people that will go around and do a glue down that bark all the way around. I kind of check my pieces. I don't always glue down everything. There might be one or two that I take care of ahead of time if I know the bark is coming off. But I'm pretty frugal, and so I only put it where I need it. But you see, I'm going right up to there where I added that other piece of bark, and this will help that bark stay in, where I added bark to that one crack. Now, the Inlays granulators comes from turtle feathers, turtlefeathers.com. They do have what they call bright red. They have a blue. I have used them both, but they don't seem to show up enough in most of my woods. So most of the time I am using a turquoise inlay. I have used a little of the red and the blue in my ash pieces because it would be a lighter piece and it would show up. But I like the turquoise, and so do my customers. They definitely enjoy that little piece of turquoise that gives it a little color, character, and makes it pop. And I go completely around, filling it in. Now, when I'm doing the outside, I usually fill all my cracks by taking my bowl off the lathe, filling the cracks, hopefully only taking it off once. But sometimes you may have to take it off more than once because you either find another crack or maybe some of that turquoise has come out. And that definitely can happen. I turn dry wood. Oh, here I'm adding medium CA, and that's before I put on the accelerator. So I've got most of my cracks filled. I am going around, I'm putting a medium CA, and there I spray it with my accelerator. It does not take long for it to dry, but give it a little bit. You can see that it's wet in some spots. Okay, we are back. I put it back on my lathe. My problem was because I had cored this is not quite turning true as it should be. And you can see I've got a wood block there, and basically what it is it's underneath your carpet you've got that cushion, that kind of spongy cushion. That's between my block that I've got a friction block, and then I've got it turning. And it's going to be, it was a little off center. So I'm just going to take some fine cuts and find out how bad it is and how much. And if it's, I can always do a little bit more sanding to take care of those spots that did not really turn true. I turn off the lathe to move my tool. That's a big safety, especially if you've got pieces that are not geometrically balanced. Okay, I'm taking light cuts. What I'm doing is I'm taking off the shellac that protected my wood from my CA stains, and I'm taking off the little bit of extra CA and turquoise and bark. And when I get up to that spots where I added the bark, I try to go very gently because I really don't want those pieces coming out again. And as you can see, my piece is not in there real true, but I've got enough bark got enough wood that I can take a little off. I'm doing a push cut, real light. And when I get up there next to the bark, I try to go extremely light. And I can still take a little bit more off. The more I take off right now, the less I have to sand. And that's always a good thing. Now, I'm checking my bark to see, oops, right there, see, it's ready to come off. So I need to go back, get my accelerator and my glue, and I don't take it off the lathe for little ones like that, or even big ones. If I can do it there, I do it there. But you can see I'm missing a piece of bark right there, just above that one that I've got, and I will fix that up a little bit later. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, I have got a negative rake scraper. It is sharpened on both sides, the bottom and the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a thin cut across there, get rid of any tool marks that I can, and just make it as smooth as I can. And I move my tool rest. The negative rake scraper, you want it cutting at basically center or just a little above center. So I'm moving my tool rest to make that. Yep. And one more cut. Just real light. And that'll have to be just sanded off. Okay, I am now sanding the bottom. I took my tool rest away. I'm putting in my, right there on the very right-hand side, you saw me put in the, it's a great big kind of funnel, I'm going to call it, that is my dust collector. And it'll collect dust. Now, I reversed my my spin on my lathe, and I slowed it down. I usually am sanding at about 130 because that's about the slowest I can go to, you know, definitely below 300 when I'm sanding. I start out sanding at an 80 grit, and then I stop and hand sand where it needs it, where I've got some tool marks, maybe I've got some extra glue that's sticking in there, but I am hand sanding. I stop my tool, I hand sand those spots, usually with my 80 and my 120, and then I will go back and turn my lathe on and sand again. And this is sanding at about an 80. Okay, I'm seeing some spots I want to get back to. And when you've got something that is not geometrically balanced, it is hard to get out to those edges. So I do a lot of hand sanding on those tips. My sandpaper goes, you know, the 80 up to 400. And maybe just a little bit more. I want a smooth edge. You can see there where I put in the bark. Now, if there was any bark that came off or any turquoise that came out, I would be taking it off the lathe. I would be adding my shellac and then redoing the process of adding it in. And it happens every now and then. Wood is wood. Most of my pieces are dry wood. I usually don't do wet wood when I'm adding turquoise. And the reason being is I find that when the wet wood, when it dries, then it open up and I lose my turquoise. Okay, here I have a parting tool. I am ready to start the inside of mine. Now, because this one is cored, it's a little bit different than what I normally do. Normally I come in with a piece and cut into the bark about a ½ inch from the edge. This one was almost already there because it was cored. But I'm still coming in with a parting tool, spinning it about anywhere between 900 to 1,000 rotations. And I'm coming in gently. That doesn't mean I'm not going to lose pieces. You do. But if it was a full piece, I cut into the bark about a ½ inch, and then I start working in to get my 3/8. It's easier to find a piece of bark that's a ½ inch wide than it is 1/3/8 of an inch in the shop. And you can see I'm coming down. I like to come down past the bark a little bit with my parting tool. Now I'm taking a little bit more off, just a little at a time, and then I stop and check how many of my pieces of bark are ready to fly off. Because if they are, then I want to stop and glue them back in. Check, you can see I'm checking that bark. And I'm checking to see what's going, never mind what's going on with all of it. Okay, this is my 5/8 of an inch bowl gouge. I'm coming in relatively strong, taking it off. Again, I'm just checking my bark. Is it staying on, or do I need to glue anything down? Okay. I do a lot of measuring. Is it my 3/8 or less? What does it look like? Okay, I've got my parting tool. Now, one thing that I didn't mention earlier is when I am parting it off and there's bark on both sides of my parting tool, when I'm pulling it out, I try to lean my parting tool to the inside of my bowl so I don't take any bark on the outside out. So when I cut in, and then when I'm pulling my tool out, I lean to the inside of my bowl, and if I lose bark on that side, no big deal. Here I'm measuring again. Okay, my Jet 1642, I can pull my whole stock, headstock to the end. So I am turning off the end, and I have got a dentist lamp above me that shines just perfectly right into my bowls. If you go to the dentist and you see that light that they use, a friend was redoing his lights in his dentist office, and we bought the old lights from him, and they work really good in our shop. We got them mounted above our pieces. Now, I've got my calipers out, measuring the thickness of my bowl. I do not want to make a funnel, and I want a nice even edge. So now what I'm doing is, I've got my bowl gouge, trying to just take in just a little bit there. I am leaving my center. If you look at my bowl there, you can see that the center has got a wood in it. I am just curving down on the outside of the outside sides. I am trying to leave as much wood in the center as I can. And the reason for that is so that my wings don't move. The more you take off from the center of your bowl, the more your wings move. And the more your wings move, the more you'll end up with a lopsided bowl. So I'm leaving that center in there, and I've got it going. Okay, I am moving my tool rest. What I am going to do is I have got a wonderful heavy-duty scraper that I am using. It is I can't tell you where my husband ordered it, but it is about at least 2 inches thick, and the depth of the scraper is about maybe 3/8. You can see that, and it is not a negative rate scraper. It is only shaved on one side, or sharpened on one side. But to use it, you've got to have your tool rest above the center of your bowl, so that you're pointing down when you use that scraper. So you'll see me move my tool rest a lot, going from, one tool to another. Here it is, the heavy-duty scraper. And I'm just shaving off. You can see it is not a lot. I'm just shaving it off. I find it works better for me than my bowl gouge, to get that fine tool, just to get that edge right. Okay, I'm moving my tool rest. I'm going back to my bowl gouge. I can see where it gets pretty thick right down there. Now what I want to do is I want to go down about 2 inches or so, or maybe even possibly a little more, with my 3/8 of an inch or less, or whatever width that you want your bowl. And then I'm going to take my bowl off my lathe, leave it on my chuck, to add the inlay. You can see the line there. I'm just taking a little bit more off, working it down. Now, I go back to my heavy-duty scraper, and I'll even up those 2 spots above and below that line. Now, as I'm bending over to get my tools, you can see I have on a shield, I have on safety glasses underneath that shield, and I have a mask. I wear my mask, I would say 90%, if not more, when I'm down in the shop. I work dry wood, and I wear my mask. Now, I'm marking where it's more than my 3/8 of an inch, and oh, right there I stopped it. I marked where I want to put my inlays down into it, and I went back. I took it off my lathe, and I took it over to my table and put the inlays in. We did not take a move. We did not show that again. But you can see here where I'm taking off, I'm using that heavy-duty scraper to lightly take off the shellac, any extra of my inlays, any extra bark maybe that I put in, just real lightly, just taking it all off. And I went down to where I had that pencil mark, because where I had that pencil mark was where it was getting a, where my thickness of my wall was more than my 3/8 or whatever I wanted for this bowl. And then again, one more light cut. Now, when I take off my piece from my thing, I take it off, leaving it on the chuck, so therefore I don't have to redo anything. Okay, I consider the first the top 2.5 to 3 inches of that bowl done. I'll come back with it, but now I'm working a little bit more of the bottom. And again, that is because the wings will move when you get further, deeper down into the bowl. And if you start cutting those wings again, what's going to happen is one side's going to get narrower than the other, or thinner than the other. And you can see I'm still trying to leave as much wood in that center of my bowl as I can until it's time to take it off. Now, moving it up, I'm going to pull out that heavy-duty scraper again and take off that fine line right in there. And yes, I am cutting above center, and it's light cuts. Now I can tell it's getting thick there. I might even have a little bit of a hump there. I mark it with my pencil. I know exactly then where I want it to be. Some of you wood turners know exactly what it is. I like to tell I like to use my pencil to say, this is the spot I want to work on. And then I just gradually work that little spot. And I can feel, yep, maybe I feel, if I feel a little bit of a bump again, I mark it again with my pencil and go from there. Okay, I think we're taking the center out. So now I'm getting the depth I want on my bowl. Gradually taking a little bit at a time. And measuring, I don't want to make a funnel. We'll see what I have on the bottom. We'll see how much I can, how thick that bottom is. Okay, I'm happy with the thickness with using my bowl gouge. I'm going to go back to my heavy-duty scraper. I'm going to take it off, and then I will move it from the lathe again and fill any of those holes or cracks that I see there. So I'll go back, take it back to my table, work on, Dremel it, open those cracks up, put a little bit of shellac in, and then fill it with my turquoise key filings, then my little bit of my turquoise, and then I will bring it back and take one more cutting on the lathe before I, begin my sanding. So right here, I'm taking it off the lathe to fill some more of those little cracks that you see. And you can see I'm taking my chuck and all off. And here we go, we've got one. Now it's been filled. You can see a little bit of glue sticking there. You can see where I put in some more. And now I'm going to take a very, very light cut. And when I'm done with this, then I begin sanding the inside. Now, when I am completely done with my bowl, I've got it sanded, I've even got it and I've got it off the lathe. I will go back and I will take my Dremel and I will lightly take off any glue shiny spots that are in the bark or even on the piece, because sometimes sanding won't get them all off. So I go back to my Dremel and I just lightly take it off, and then it's done. When I finish it, because it's dry wood, I put it in a I'll put it in a finish that is 1/3 Danish oil, 1/3 boiled linseed oil, and 1/3 polyurethane. We have a great big great big barrel, and we have finish in there, and we dip pieces in there. Again, it is 1/3 Danish oil, 1/3 boiled linseed oil, 1/3 polyurethane. Then I buff it. Now this is my piece done. It has not been buffed. I buff it with the 3-wheel buffing system, and you have the white diamond and you end up with the carnauba wax. And I think that is it for the turning. And I hope I got my my pieces from Rosewood that is in Halltown outside of Springfield. That's where we buy a lot of our pieces. Thank you. Have a great day. and I hope you enjoyed it.